Oh, I got one more left. This here's just the one, my hand drawing of the proposals of where I want to put things out there. And I forgot to mention that we're starting rock work today on building a statue out there of the memorial to the CCC workers. And that statue is going to be right at the end of the building along with the flagpole. And that's all I have. Is there any questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Might be of interesting to note for those fishermen in the crowd that this lake holds the record for the black crappie. A state record black crappie was taken out of this lake back in the 60s or late 50s by Hazel Fay, who used to be a concessionaire there. And I've ridden my bicycle around this lake, so I know a little bit more than some folks. All right, thank you. Thanks a lot. More public comment on non-agenda items. Yes, sir. Please come up and address the...
Hello, my name is Dennis Steinman. I'm from Lawrence, Kansas. And I came to see you guys, I think it was maybe 4 months ago, time gets away from us, and introduced you to a new concept of a game recovery system. You remember that? And I'm back, I guess, to see how that, if you guys have had any chance to think about that, the legalization of that type of game recovery system. And I'd like to make a formal request that you change the regulation and make that legal in Kansas. I did have a little booth at the Big Buck Classic here in Topeka a couple of months ago, and I showed our product. And as you know, there are other companies that make these products. I believe you asked me that question last time. But I did show my product. I was very open about the fact that it wasn't legal in Kansas, and I did have some folks sign I guess a petition or whatever, just showing their support, which I can share with you. There's about 60 names on there, and I had very few, 1 or 2 people that indicated that they didn't think it was a good idea. But in general, everyone I've talked to, and pretty much everyone. There's some people that disagree, but pretty much that it's a good thing. And if you recall, the purpose of this thing is to decrease the loss of wounded game. It's to give the hunter a better opportunity to find the game that he shot with a bow. So, would you have any questions, and then also I'd like to know if there's anything I need to do to go forward in a more formal way to ask you to change this. And
I remember your presentation, and probably what I would like to see, and I would suggest do it in a summary form. I'd like for you to email me a little more about this so that I can kind of, for myself, to see whether or not this is something that there'd be enough interest or demand. A lot of times if you try to describe something as being a permissible product and then you open Pandora's box and you may have other things, and I'd just like to see kind of a good summary description and then let us reflect on it a little bit more. My email address is in the books, and I'd like to see just a little bit on it.
Okay. Be glad to do that.
Chris, do we have a process if this gentleman comes up or anybody else comes up and requests something like this? Do we have a process that they go through other than what he's doing now?
There's not really a formalized process. I mean, people can submit information anytime they want. We have a regulatory cycle, and tonight we'll be voting on the reg in particular that he's discussing that would need to be changed, but we have to do a proper notice period to make regulatory changes. So it would be not appropriate to change it tonight to accommodate him. But in the future, our regulatory cycle, we're not bound to any, we do things on a certain period of time based upon how we have to do, for example, deer, the applications, and gearing up for this season and getting out the information to the public. That doesn't mean that we're bound to limit our changes in the reg to just tonight. For example, we could bring this regulation forward. It takes, some notice period time, 60 days, plus development of a regulation time to try to figure out what language would be suitable. So to answer your question, there's no formal process, but we take all the comments that come in, and I had asked if Dennis had contacted Lloyd Fox and discussed the issue with him, and that's typically for changes in our deer equipment reg, how that process works. Anybody can make a suggestion, and if the commission wants to move forward or the department wants to propose the regulation, they can do so, but there's a number of ways that ideas filter into regulation form, but there's no, you have to write a petition or anything like that.
So by Gerald telling him to submit to the commission his thoughts, and then we can review it as a commission, obviously, how we want, he should talk to Lloyd in the meantime?
Yeah, we should discuss it with Lloyd.
Which I have.
Right.
Okay.
And so that way the department's engaged at the same time. And I would also ask, if you're going to send stuff to the commission, would you also send it to me so I can see if I'm going to have to develop a draft at some point and make sure that Lloyd's looped in as well.
Would you like for me to send it to all the commission?
That'd be fine. Or you could send it to Sheila, and she can distribute it to the commissioners. That'd be fine.
Yeah, one of the things that tends to be my personal preferred way is that when people have an idea that they want to, and I've had some people in the fishing end want to have me consider some things, and I like to sort of have staff, maybe law enforcement and some other people sort of weigh in on it. And it is not a formal process, and I may want to have the same thing done, or we may suggest that, but by all means, if you send it because if I personally would have liked to have seen it, but I can't send things on to other commissioners with an email, so why don't you send it to Sheila and then have her make a distribution, because I guess I'd want to know what powers it, how big it is, where it's manufactured, what would you call it, and then we'd see what we do from there.
Okay.
Could you get 10 of your product to Lloyd? Or something that looks like your product?
Yeah,
to where we could see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you remember when I showed it to you last time?
Yeah, but until you put it in your hand and really get an idea, it's kind of hard to.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay.
I could send those to Lloyd. Is that what you'd like for me to do? Or would you like?
Yeah, Lloyd Fox would be great.
Do you have any questions about it specifically that you can recall or anything?
Has this been done in other states, this product?
I called every state, and honestly, I don't remember how many states. There are a few that it's illegal in. It's not the majority. It's a big minority that is illegal in. And the way I understand it, in Kansas, it was everything electronic was made illegal on the bow or the arrow at one time. It was a wide brush. Isn't that? I'm pretty sure that's correct. And so this is just part of that regulation.
Yeah, you said the minority is legal or illegal?
Illegal.
There's 50 states. How many states are allowing this?
I don't recall.
5, 10?
Probably about 5 to 10.
Okay.
One thing I do remember is I went down through all the tags that were issued last year in all the states, and then I compared the legal states, and I found that about 76% of all the tags that were sold in the U.S. last year were in legal states. Does that make sense? I don't remember the number of states, but
Off the top of your head, do you know how long it's been legal in the longest state at this point?
I don't know.
Okay.
See, I just called them and said, I called Fish and Game in every state, and I said, is this legal?
Okay.
And, of course, I had to go through, find the right person to answer that question many times, but I just wanted to get a consent,
Sure.
see how many there were. I think that in most states it was the same thing. It's caught up in that, they just, at some time, they made a broad brush rule that said no electronics on the bow or the arrow, which is what happened in Kansas, as far as I understand. And then the lighted sights came along, or the lighted pins came along, and those were legalized. The lighted knock was legalized, and then this would be just another item like that. But the idea is that it helps reduce the loss of game. It helps a guy find a deer that he shot. It has a very limited battery life, and I think that's the nature of it, because it has to be very small. So the battery has to be very small. So it can't last very long. So a couple of days and it's no good. So it's just designed, and it all started for me. I've lived in Kansas pretty much all my life, hunted here almost back to the first bow season, and I've lost deer before, and I lost a real trophy. I finally found him. It took me 2 days to find him 2 years ago, and that's what started all this. And I just decided I was going to figure out a way to help solve this problem. Not that it happens real often, but it does happen. And
all right. Well, why don't you get some individual products to Lloyd, get us an email of a fairly concise description, and we'll see where we go with it from there. And I'm interested in, where's it manufactured?
Well, we're still in the process.
In your basement?
Well, at this point.
I understand, but it's a Kansas product, and
absolutely.
So we're interested if there's something that we can do. I just want to kind of move forward in
I did just get
a deliberate way.
My company was just approved through the Department of Commerce to have access to some tax credits for investors in the company, and so they're behind it. I guess you'd say.
All right.
So we hope to make it a success.
Anybody else have any questions?
My last question is about, you've patented it?
It's patent pending.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, patent pending. So I didn't want you to provide proprietary information to the department unnecessarily if you
Right.
felt unsecure about that. All
Okay.
right? So,
Fair enough.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, lawyer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Brannon. I'm from Seneca, Kansas. I thought the agenda today was going to cover some discussion over the senior license increase that they were, to where the seniors had to pay for their hunting and fishing licenses, those over 65. I just realized that that's not on the agenda, but since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and address my issues anyway, if that's all right.
Sure.
We are going to discuss the legislative affairs here shortly.
Okay, I didn't see that on there. I bought a fishing license in the state of Kansas for my whole life, except my 4 years in the Air Force in Arizona. And just because I turned 65 doesn't mean I should quit buying that hunting and fishing license. I will take whatever you're going to give me. Don't misunderstand. If you're going to offer something, I don't care if I'm in a grocery store and they're offering free samples of ice cream, I'm going to take that too. But the thing is the hunters and fishermen have always supported our sport, and I feel that we should continue to do so. And if I, at 66, can afford to buy a hunting license in Alaska or Wyoming or California, then I ought to be able to buy one here in Kansas where I fish and hunt the most. It's one of those things that over time, things change. And now this is changing, and it should be accepted. $17, $18 a year, or whatever it is really pretty small for what we're doing. Thanks for your time, guys. Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you for your time and your comments. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name's Richard Hayes. I'm from Topeka. We've got a few items. First off, I'd like to indicate my agreement with the previous speaker as far as the licensing changes that you're contemplating in the legislature now. I agree that we'd be more than willing, I think, as seniors to contribute and make sure that the agency is able to continue to provide the services they've provided. I think one of the things that maybe wasn't included or thought of, and perhaps I know it's been thought of and thought about and has been an issue that concerns the agency and perhaps some of the older folks that do hunt and fish, and that is how many young people aren't involved in those areas. And I would have wished that maybe there could have been some little more creative thinking in trying to integrate getting some of that involved with some of the seniors and perhaps rolling those things together so that we could involve more young people as a part of those seniors being paying more. Maybe there could have been some creative thinking to get a senior to bring in a young person. That said, I have some other items that I've kind of outlined here. I would like personally, and perhaps there's other people that feel the same, and if any of these items I bring up, I'm incorrect, that information exists, then I stand corrected. But on your website, I'd love to see more budget detail. Now, I know in many cases in agencies, they don't particularly like to expose the budgets for whatever reasons, and I understand that. However, if we're going to be partners with this agency in trying to improve hunting, fishing, camping in the state, I believe that we need to see more of the detail as to what's going on in the agency. I'd like to see all grants, the money for all grants received, or detail about grants received and grants issued out of the department. I think the public deserves to see that type of activity and be aware of it. I'd like to be able to see a little more historical information regarding hunters, numbers of hunters over whatever period statistically they have available, hunting and fishing. I don't want to just focus on hunting, but hunting and fishing. I think that's something that maybe the public will be more supportive of issues for the agency if they're a little more aware of things dealing with the agency. So I'd like to see that, and the licensing, and whether it's specific to hunting big game or whether it's just hunting in general. The economic impact in these communities out, especially the ones perhaps out west that are more affected by pheasant hunting and perhaps some of the deer hunting. I don't know whether the agency has any economic information from those communities as far as over a long period of time how that economic impact has occurred, whether it's up or down in particular years. I think that'd be something that would be very helpful. Maybe I'm more of a information person. I like to see that, but it does again give me some sense of how the agency's doing. When you ask me to pay for a license, again, I stand telling you I don't have a problem doing that at my age. However, I would like to see the money that I'm perhaps providing to the agency being used in such a way that then impacts those communities in a positive way out in western Kansas. And in that same regard, pheasant hunting, and I talked to Todd earlier, and Todd told me that we're ranked number 2, and I think that's probably been the case for quite a long period of time, is pheasant hunting. I don't know why we're not number 1. And it isn't the ranking that's important to me. It's the fact that ranking, what comes with that ranking is a lot of activity, hunting activity, and I'm speaking of pheasants, that comes from outside the state. And I hear people talking about, in Kansas, talking about going to South Dakota and pheasant hunting. Now, they don't hunt here. Now, that's their preference, and I'm not going to let that influence me a lot, but I have a feeling that a lot of people from outside of Kansas go to South Dakota too, because it's in a magazine or whatever, it gets a ranking of number 1. And I think that has an impact, again, economically, in those communities out in West. And over the years, I've hunted out in western Kansas probably, since around 1960. And I've seen the decline, and it isn't just because of hunting, but I've seen the decline of those communities, and it bothers me, it hurts me, and I feel that anything that we can do to help those communities economically, we should do. And I'd hope that we could study whatever South Dakota does and adopt whatever's appropriate and works to improve our ranking and perhaps take over that number 1 spot, get a lot more people coming to Kansas to hunt pheasants. One last thing, and then I made some notes here. If I can locate it. I don't know whether the agency has a quote, a 5-year plan. Knowing Robin, I think probably if it doesn't exist, it probably will, and he has time to devote to that. But I would hope that perhaps there'd be some way to channel, in using the website, to channel some suggestions. If again, the hunters, fishing folks and the campers and those interested in the agency had a way to channel ideas, thoughts to the agency through the website, that perhaps they could develop over time a 5-year plan to, at first identify all the things that they really feel they can accomplish and develop that 5-year plan to accomplish them. So with that, I don't know whether you have any questions. But.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on non-agenda items?
Hadley Donges, El Dorado, Kansas. I'll make mine very brief. Mine's more of an invitation. I was at a community meeting at our Butler Community College, and I was talking to the president of the college, Jackie Vietti, and we talked about the commission a little bit, and she would like to send through me a public invitation to have a meeting held at our Hubbard Center at the community college in El Dorado. And if you hold out long enough, our stadium will be built, and you'd get to see it too as you came by to the community college. So that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Anybody else? All right. Well, let's move into the department report. Secretary's remarks.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, on the adjusted agenda, it had me down to just give you a real brief update on some commission employee awards that have been received at a regional and national level. We don't do this very often, and it occurred to me that we have some employees who are being recognized within regional associations and at national association levels, and so I was just going to take just a minute of time this afternoon just to kind of mention those folks. First of all, on an enforcement side, Doug Whitaker, who's one of our wildlife investigators, was awarded the Wildlife Officer of the Year award by the Shikara Safari Club International, which is really a fine award and one that's well recognized around the country by Safari. We also had another officer, Tyson Nielsen, who is our boating officer of the year, and Tyson will then be eligible and will be a part of the regional recognition by the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators. And so those two law enforcement officers involved in those prestigious awards. We also had a district biologist, Craig Schultz, who's down in Elkhart, very southwest corner of the state, was recognized at the North American Wildlife Conference by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their Wings Across America's award. And this essentially was for his efforts and involvement in management, habitat management in that area, but particularly his work with lesser prairie chickens on Forest Service lands. At the national, at the Midwest Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies levels, we had two of our biologists. One was a fisheries biologist, Tommy Booger, who has since retired, was recognized as the Fisheries Biologist of the Year, and Lloyd Fox, for that same association, was recognized as the Wildlife Biologist of the Year. And so this is let's see, there's probably about 12 or 15 states that are involved in the Midwest Association, and so those that's across all those states that those two individuals were recognized. At the association meeting this last September, one of our landowners in the state, Ted Alexander from the Alexander Ranch in Barber County, was recognized at the national level for his stewardship for wildlife habitat and their Wildlife Habitat Conservation Award. So again, a very prestigious thing for the state of Kansas to have a landowner that we have worked with a lot to be recognized at the national level. And last, I'll mention Joe Kramer, who at the same North American Conference was awarded the Ducks Unlimited Wetland Conservation Achievement Award for state and provincial agencies category. And this, again, in terms of the Ducks Unlimited awards that are given on a national level, is a real feather in the hat for Joe and, again, for the agency. So in every case, the agency stands out in a really big way when our employees are recognized at these regional and national levels. And so we congratulate all of them for being the type of individuals they are and representing all of our employees within the agency. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have the Fort Riley presentation. Probably out there.
Can we do it the command officer or major way? Do it. We'll do it out front there. I can get Chairman Lauber out here, and Secretary Jennison, and Mr. Kramer. not used to using a microphone, so I'll just project my voice if that's okay with everyone. I'm Command Sergeant Major retired Jim Champagne, and I'm formerly the Division Command Sergeant Major for the 1st Infantry Division in Fort Riley. And I just retired after 30 years of service this past November, and now I'm associated with the Fort Riley Outdoorsman's Group. And over the past 3 years, the Commission has voted a special hunting series of dates for soldiers who are deployed overseas. Now, what you have to understand is soldiers don't choose the dates that they're deployed. And we have a lot of great outdoorsmen that are in the Army. And at times, they're not allowed the opportunity to meet the regular season for hunting. You know, whether it's upland bird hunting or white-tailed deer hunting or any type of hunting that they enjoy here in Kansas. And the Commission, the last 3 years, have given us the opportunity for those soldiers who qualify that come off of deployment in a special season to be allowed to hunt for large game. And we want to say thank you. And I tell the soldiers when they, I used to tell the soldiers, I don't anymore. I used to tell the soldiers when they came to Fort Riley that Kansas is a known state with their passion for the outdoors. But over the last 6 years since I've been here in Kansas, myself and my family, you're talking about a guy who grew up in New England, man, who's never been in the Midwest and has now made his home here in the state of Kansas. Day in and day out proven that you are a state that has a passion for their soldiers. And I want to thank you and the Commission for every year voting that special season for those soldiers that are deployed when they do come home and have the ability to have the opportunity to hunt. So on behalf of the soldiers at Fort Riley and the 1st Infantry Division, we'd like to present you with this print, just a small token of saying thank you to the Commission for supporting our soldiers, and a 1st Infantry Division wall clock so that you can count the time when we no longer have soldiers in harm's way. So we want to thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Agency and state fiscal status, Robin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm going to reverse my comments. I was going to talk first about our fiscal status, but I think and what I was going to do for the agency, I was going to take away from Chris's thunder. He's going to do the legislative initiative, but I was going to take some time and talk about the 65 and over issue this year. And in view of Bill and Richard being here, and I appreciate both of your comments, and also, Richard, your comments, I'm going to address those as well. But I would like to talk a little bit about the 65 issue. It has been a big issue, and I know that a number of people, probably the commissioners too, have gotten emails over that issue, and we've had our staff at various outdoor shows, and I think in contact with our constituents, have had to field some questions. And, I feel a little bit bad about that, but I want to explain, I think, for particularly the commission and the staffs here, and also those of you in attendance, really what our rationale was and how we've approached it. First of all, why we did it. As I think most of you know, and if you've read the papers over this issue, you know that one of the things that we identified is the 65 and over user group is becoming a much larger percentage of our total user group than what it had previously been. And the baby boom generation started to retire about 2 years ago, and it's going to continue to ramp up until the folks that are about 55 right now. So that user group is going to continue to be a larger percentage of the folks that we have out in the field or on the waters of Kansas. We know that in part because of if you look at deer hunters in Kansas, and deer hunters are actually a growing group of hunters. If you look at all of our licenses, they're pretty well flat. Actually, you could probably say they're trending down just a little bit. But if you look at deer hunters, all deer hunters are growing. I think it was about 13%. The over 65 deer hunters are growing, depending on the number of the graph you have, but it's about 25 to 27%. So even in the deer hunter group, the group that is growing, our seniors are outpacing the all other of hunters and fishermen. And so that creates an issue for the department. How do you address that? And Richard brought up recruitment. I'm going to speak to that in a minute. But we do need to get the kids out in the field. And anything that we do with seniors, while it is a big part of the user group, quite frankly, it's a stopgap measurement, or a stopgap measure. It's a stopgap for somewhere between 10 or 15 years, and we are going to have to address the recruitment issue. But when you look at the 65 and over, one of the issues, or the other issue, obviously there is an issue of hunting licenses. But the other issue is the Pittman Robinson Dingle Johnson funding that the department gets. And it's coincidental, but this happens to be the 75th anniversary of Pittman Robinson, so I think it's an appropriate time for us to talk about Pittman Robinson and what it has meant for the North American model and what Kansas has been able to do with that. We have a comparison, and I'm not going to go into it, but if you look at Kansas in 1947, and that was 65 years ago, and what Kansas looks like today, it is amazing. And it is amazing because of the partnership between the hunters, the anglers, and the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, which at that point was Fish and Game, and then it was Department of Wildlife and Parks, now Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. We have, and the Sergeant Major, you heard him speak to it, and it's well known, we have created a hunter's paradise in the state of Kansas. And it's something that we need to maintain. And if you look at what we had in 1947 and what we have today, it takes some money, it takes people to continue that tradition. And if we are going to preserve that, we can't short the funding on this agency. The wildlife and fisheries side of this agency does not get any general fund from the state of Kansas. It has been and will continue to be totally funded by our sportsmen through their license fees and through the Pittman Robinson Dingle Johnson money. And I think it's important for seniors, and I will tell you, I don't think we did not underestimate this issue at all, and I probably should go back to our strategy of why we did it the way we did it. In the late 90s, former Secretary Williams brought a similar issue to the legislature. And I don't know who all was involved in it from the department. I'm sure some of them are still here. But Steve brought forward a very well thought out plan. And as is the case with most plans, immediately people started attacking it. Well, the plan that Steve brought out, there wasn't really any place for compromise. It was either to vote for it or not vote for it. And the fact of the matter is, there were a lot of legislators that as soon as Steve brought his plan out, they got calls from their constituents and they made promises to their constituents, I won't vote for that, and they didn't. And we could not get it through the legislature. When we talked about doing it this year, knowing how legislators are going to react, we just decided that we are going to propose getting rid of the exemption for seniors. In our discussions, we never had any intention or we never had any thought that the legislature would do that. We thought they might increase the age. And if you look at that, in 1971 is when the legislature reduced the age of exemption. They reduced it from 70 years old to 65 in 1971. In 1971, the life expectancy was about 71. Today, the life expectancy is 78. And we looked at that, and we thought at that point, if you want to be consistent, if they took it to 65 when the life expectancy was 71, it was not out of the realm of possibilities to think that if the life expectancy is 78, we could take it to 75. But quite frankly, Chris and I didn't think that we'd get 75 out of the legislature, but we did think we might get 70. And once again, I take you back to the big part of this is our seniors are paying the excise tax on the equipment they buy. When they buy guns and ammo, when they buy fishing equipment, they're paying that excise tax. We have no way to guarantee that that money is coming back to Kansas unless we can show them as a hunter. That was in large part why we wanted to increase the age. I've taken 150 calls over this issue. I've got notes on 135 of them. They average about 25 minutes long. And in that process, early on, it became clear that seniors preferred a reduced price license rather than us messing with the age. And so that was the first thing that we decided to do. Also, we had a senior call. We actually had several of them call and suggested that we have a senior pass. And to be perfectly honest with you, the gentleman that suggested that suggested a $100 senior pass. At that point, we started talking to federal aid to see how we could do a senior pass. And to keep this fairly short and not talk about lifetime licenses and the transformation that they've made, Mike Miller really was doing the work for us. He started, and Richard, this gets to one of your things, we'd like to have that information too, and we can get it now for what, Mike, 5 years is about how far we can go back and have accurate information. We're doing something the department could not have done several years ago because they quite frankly did not have that data in a place to mine it and be able to present it to people. But anyway, in Mike's efforts and mining data and talking to federal aid, U.S. Fish and Wildlife has recently changed some rules, but we are able to get a senior pass for $40. So what we proposed, and actually through Senator Schmidt from Hayes, in consultation with him, the proposal is a half-time annual senior license up to 75 years old. Once you reach 75, you don't have to buy a license. If you would prefer to buy an annual permit or a pass, we can sell that for $40. And there may be people wondering why we can do that. Well, the way that U.S. Fish and Wildlife now does the lifetime licenses or senior passes or things of that nature, you can amortize that license over the expectant life of the individual. And today, someone who lives to be 65 is expected to live really 19 more years, but we're using 18. So when somebody turns 65, they can pay $40. The amortization says that we can take a portion of that every year for $18, enough to be a license. And then we will get Dingle Johnson, or Pittman Robinson Dingle Johnson, for 18 years on that senior. So what we've made available is an annual license, be it fishing, hunting, or combo. We have made available a senior combination lifetime pass for $40. Dingle Johnson money, we get slightly under $9 right now. Pittman Robinson, we get a little over $16. So for every senior pass that we sell in the state of Kansas, we will get essentially $25 a year for 18 years. That's almost $900,000 when you calculate that based on what U.S. Fish and Wildlife say are hunters over 65. It came up a lot of times, this isn't the only way that you could get essentially $1 million, and it's not. But to get that $900,000, and it will be $1 million as the baby boomers really start retiring. Actually, it'll get up to about 1.4. To get that 847,000, Chris? To get that $847,000, it's essentially costing Kansas hunters, seniors, $66,000 to get that. And I will remind you that the likelihood is the Kansans are paying that already when they're buying their guns and ammo and their fishing equipment. So all we're doing is bringing the Pittman Robinson Dingle Johnson back to Kansas, where our sportsmen have been spending it. And I will tell you that I've probably talked to 15 or 20 seniors since we came out with that proposal, and the worst comment I've gotten is, I can live with that. most of them think it's a great idea. In fact, the calls that we had when they understood, because we all know hunters and anglers are not selfish people. I don't know too many hunters or anglers that have not spent time or money mentoring somebody else. So they're not selfish people. And when they understand how important it is to preserve what we have and pass it on to the next generation, we have not had a problem with that. I will say, Chris can get into particulars. The bill is out of the Senate. We passed it out of a House committee on Tuesday, and we're working on the votes to get that out of the House. Now, to go ahead, I'd like to address Richard's questions, because really there are a number of things that we are doing, and we touched briefly on. I touched briefly on recruitment. That is something that's very important to the agency. It's very important to a number of our conservation groups, and in fact, just this past week, Keith, we just Pass It On Outdoor Mentors through cooperation with Pheasants Forever, Wild Turkey Federation, and the department has hired an outdoor coordinator. I'm sorry, not an outdoor coordinator, a youth coordinator, or we're hiring a youth coordinator. Did I leave anybody out of that group, Keith? I think that was the size of it. And it's something, the department has been working on recruitment for a number of years. The wildlife groups have been working for a number of years. Coordination would really help in that regard, and so we are addressing that to make sure that this stopgap measure of addressing the senior issue has something to follow up on it, and I think we will accomplish that. Website, more budget details. I don't know if the website's the best spot for that. We get some criticism that our website is too information intensive right now. For guys that probably come to our meetings, they like it. For people that are looking at our website to find just the rules, the regs, the places to hunt, I think they think it's a little bit cumbersome. We're looking at ways to address that to kind of satisfy both. But I will tell you, Richard, that part of the SMART system, which is the new accounting software that we all gripe about, quite frankly, the whole role for that was to make government more transparent. And so I think the desire to see where we're spending money, and even the grants, we're looking now at trying to get the grants in the SMART system. So I think in time, those types of things are going to be more transparent so that people can see it. Your historical info is what I was speaking of a little bit earlier, that we're able to start to get that, but we can't go back that far yet. The economic impact, that's another thing. Is the second week that I was on the job, Secretary Sexton said to me, Robin, the department determined a long time ago, or a few years ago, I don't remember what he said, that the agency can't just be the agency to sell hunting and fishing license and take care of our natural resources. We do need to get out and promote hunter recruitment and things of that nature. So I think that's something that the department actually had started to address. They'd hired a marketing position, and I think when the governor brought tourism over to the department, we'll go through some changes there. But I think it is going to give us an opportunity to really begin to address that. I can tell you that tourism figures have that every person that comes to Kansas spends an average of $230. I would suggest that hunters are probably spend a little more than most. It has tremendous economic impact, and in fact, I think U.S. Fish and Wildlife, in their studies, they kind of point out the economic impact of hunting. Your idea about pheasant hunting, we agree with you. And I think there's another thing that the governor's helped us out with bringing tourism over, that that's going to be a evolution, because the folks that came over from tourism weren't that acquainted with the outdoors. I think they're getting there, and as we have some attrition there, I think we're going to be able to replace some people that are going to be able to really understand the outdoor side of the equation as well as the marketing side. And lastly, your 5-year plan. you couldn't be more right. One of the first things I looked at, the department has always had a strategic plan. We should have a new one. Actually, the time frame is right that we should have a new one. And with bringing tourism over, we should particularly have a new one because our overall mission has grown. But quite frankly, it's just one of the things that has been on the back burner that we need to address. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time, and I don't want to take questions now and take up your time, but I'd be glad to answer any questions someone might have during the day.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I need to take some more time. I got so excited about answering Richard's question, I forgot to give the fiscal status. Basically, our budget, as it's running through the process, has really not been changed much from what the governor did that we reported on, I think, at a previous meeting. The governor is really very good to the agency this year. Of course, as I noted earlier, the wildlife fishery side gets no general fund money, or as it is this year, economic development money. So basically, what we present as a budget doesn't have a lot of problems going through the legislative process. The Parks Division, and that was one of the divisions was the most concerned this year due to last summer with the blue-green algae. It was really a bad year for parks. As most of you know, the daily park permit are really the determining factor of whether you have a good year or a bad year in the parks. So you have 4 bad weekends, Father's Day or Memorial Day, Father's Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day, and it makes it difficult for the parks. Last year was that way. And the blue-green algae, we actually had a couple of lakes closed at major weekends, so it was not a good year. The governor was, I think, very understanding of that. He put a $1.1 million supplemental for the parks. The Senate did reduce that to $700,000. The House still has it at $1.1 million. The House's proposal, there is a proposal to the Senate took it from us and gave it to the Supreme Court for the court system. I think there is a proposal that will win the day in a conference committee. I think we will get back up to the 1.1 supplemental for the current year. Governor put that in again for next year for the parks. The governor also, as most of you know, the cabin program, our partner in the cabin program is Wildscape, who really builds the cabins. To have as an aggressive cabin program as we've had over the last few years, Wildscape did have an agreement with the bank to borrow money to build those cabins. Their debt was about $1.7. Until those cabins are paid off, Wildscape gets most of the revenue for those cabins. The governor's interest in using expanded lottery money to reduce the state's debt, I went to him, asked him if he would use that to reduce Wildscape's debt, because then we begin to get 90% of the revenue for the cabins. He did that. That's going through the legislative process. And I've just now forgot, it's about $845,000 additional revenue. Yeah, so we should raise an additional $845,000 revenue from the cabin program next summer. And that was the Park Pass, which Chris will talk about, I think is going to put hopefully, in a reasonable summer, put the parks in fairly good shape. Now I'm through, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Chris.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, it's been a very busy legislative session since the start in January until now, and things are really heating up. Things are going and this is the time of year when things move real fast and switch gears, and you have to really follow the legislature. It gets actually it can get a little out of control for even those who follow the legislature every day. So I'll just go down. Basically, we have the list of bills that are on our website, and there's no report in your briefing book because even things were changing as quickly as yesterday. So, anything I would have put in there was already dated. But we have been trying to keep the website up a little more regularly with the help of Mike Miller this year, helping me out, and I've been calling him every day, and I think he's getting sick of me calling every day to make changes. But those are not the only bills the department tracks. We track about 120 or 130 bills that I keep track of every day on a daily basis that impact the department in some way, shape, or form, but it's not a direct impact on our constituents, so it doesn't make it to our website. Senate Bill 120 is the Vessel Titling Act, and it's a leftover bill from last year, actually. It was introduced in 2011, passed out of the Senate rather quickly last year, and it got into the House. And generally, the gist of it is it would require vessel titling in the state of Kansas if you have a KA number. And you only have to have a KA number if you use public waters, and obviously canoes don't have KA numbers unless they have a motor on them and they're on public water. And so it languished last year, and it would only impacted vessels that were new or upon sale. So not everybody would have to rush out and get a title. It would have just been a phase-in, essentially. And I was surprised. I thought it was stalled out in the Senate. It wasn't the department's initiative. It's State Treasurer's initiative. And the bill got out of the House committee after Dan Heskett from our agency made some comments and some suggestions to modify the bill. Dan, if you don't know, is our representative to NASBLA and also on the NASBLA titling committee, and are working towards a national standard for vessel titling. And so he made some suggestions. The bill did pass out of committee, went to the House floor, and then I think it must have been Monday. I was on the House floor, and the bill actually failed on general orders. And the process is a bill is on general orders, and then it's on final action. General orders, the legislature can amend it. When it's on final action the next day, it's got to get past general orders. Then on final action, they take an official vote. And typically, most of the time, bills have just discussion. Somebody will come up and talk about it, and it's a voice vote to pass it on general orders because the kinks have been worked out in committee. And this bill, as you can see, sitting there on the floor listening to it, people start to come up and they start to talk about it, and then you start to see the tenor of the communications, and I got to be a little concerned that it might not pass. And ultimately, that is what happened, and it failed 50 to 61 on 50 to 61 to 14. 14 people abstained from voting. So on general orders, didn't even make it to final action. All right, the next bill is a department initiative, and it's now Senate Bill 288. It started as Senate Bill 313, which now deals with abortion. The process they took and they gutted our bill, put somebody else's bill into it because it's already passed on the Senate side, and then bundled ours with another liquor bill, essentially, which is now 288. But in the bottom line on the bill, it would allow the department to allow people to bring alcohol to department properties subject to our regulations, which we do now. Currently, the rule is 3.2. You can only have 3.2 beer on our property. This would have allowed full-strength beer or wine, and we could still restrict it like we do in our reference document for public lands. So Senate Bill 288 is on House General Orders. There are only a couple days left of the regular session, and that would be Monday and Tuesday. They're in conference committees today, or they're off if they have nothing in conference. And so I have heard that they are going to work those couple of liquor bills that are bundled together next week. And then I've also heard from other sources that they aren't. In the alternative, I found out yesterday that the Senate also put our provisions into another bill that has passed the House, and I assume they will pass that bill out, and that's House Bill 2689. So as you can see, that one bill that we started with is now located in three bills, or two other bills. Senate Bill 314 is what Robin talked about, and the senior exemptions, and that did pass. The Senate was amended on the floor of the Senate went to the House committee, and I'm not going to spend any time talking about the compromise that was made in that process. What is important that wasn't noted, it did pass by a vote of 23-18 in the Senate, 23-17, I'm sorry, and then it has the provisions of House Bill 2295 that were added into the bill as it came out of committee Tuesday, and we'll talk about 2295 in a little bit. Senate Bill 316 is the department's recodification bill. Really, it takes transfers the authorities that weren't transferred in the Executive Reorganization Order number 36 that brought tourism from the Department of Commerce. It's largely a technical bill, and it did pass both houses this session, and it's on its way to the governor for signature. Senate Bill 348, not a 314 and 316 were department initiatives. Senate Bill 348 is not an initiative of the department, but it goes on the website because we think it impacts our constituents. It deals with vessels and where they're at for the purpose of taxation on January 1. And there are some people who have their vessels registered in our state, and they're out of state on January 1, and so therefore they don't get taxed in any county, and this would have taxed them at the county of the residence of the registrant. So that did have hearings passed out of the Senate 26-14. It actually had a hearing in the House, but no action has been taken since then. And I think it would have impacted about 3,000 or 3,200 voters in the state. Senate Bill 380 was a crossbow bill that was introduced in the Senate Natural Resources Committee. The bill had a hearing, and ultimately it was tabled. And when a bill is tabled, typically that means it's done for the year. There was an attempt to untable the bill, which failed by one vote. And I think that just generally speaking, the reason why it was tabled is because the department has proposed some changes tonight before the commission. And, generally speaking, I think the reception in the Senate committee towards the department did oppose the bill, and the reception was that we already have regulatory authority if we want to enact something. But I think it's still hanging out there, and we'll talk more a little bit. Senate Bill 414 deals with feral swine, and it's a Department of Agriculture bill, but it has a provision in there about hunting behind fences for feral swine. Are they really feral if they're behind a high fence? And essentially an attempt to prohibit that. That bill has jumped ship a couple times into other bills, and it was also in House Bill 2398 from last year, and I think it currently resides in substitute for House Bill 2596, and it passed out of the Senate Agriculture Committee, so it'll be on Senate General Orders. Senate Bill 447 is a department initiative, and as you know, our fees are set as a cap in statute, and we raise fees by regulation at the commission level. And the department introduced this bill originally in the House, and it was House Bill 2551. And right now the registrations are capped at $30. The regulation sets that fee at $30. The department proposed to go to $60, and that's a 3-year registration. I did the background research, and it's taken over 25 years to reach the cap. So it's not as if the department anticipated going to the cap, but it's been there since 2006, and it's probably time that the legislature raised the cap if at some point in the future we had to raise vessel registrations. House Bill 2551 passed out of the House committee without comment, went to the floor and failed on House General Orders on a voice vote. They called for division, and I think that the vote was 29-82. So it seems that if there's a voting bill this year in the House, it's probably not going to pass. So we introduced Senate Bill 447 in the Senate. That passed out of committee without comment, and then passed on the Senate final action on a vote of 28 to 12, which means if bills have made, one other note, if bills have made it out of conference, they are, or out of one house, then they are conferenceable, which means if we can get a bill into conference, then we can have discussion, and it's a lot easier to discuss it with 3 people than 125 on the House floor. So there were some bills introduced last year, and I'm not going to spend time on them because they haven't moved. 2089, 2152, 2168. House Bill 2295, however, has been, last year it was a conglomeration of deer bills. This year there was a substitute introduced, and it dealt with 3 things: crossbows, a pre-rut antlerless season, which would be, October or September, antlerless rifle season, and then combination permits by 2013. And when I say combination permits, I mean one antlered, one antlerless in one permit. That was amended. It was passed out of committee, the substitute was, and it was amended on the House floor to require the department to background 25% of landowner, tenant, and hunt-your-own land permits. That's about 6,500 permits that our department would have to expend about 20,000 man-hours to. That was our estimate, which is about 12.5% of our law enforcement work time. And the net result, even if all of those permits were fraudulent, and it's a concern over people fraudulently obtaining those permits, is our loss would be about $350,000 on that if everyone was fraudulent, and we'd be expending about $600,000 worth of time is what I'm estimating. So nonetheless, that got on. 2295 then went over to the Senate, and they had hearings on it a couple times, and the department opposed the bill, and then they tabled it, same as the crossbow bill and the Senate's crossbow bill. So, and I think it's ironic, Michael Pierce, I talked to him regularly during the session, asked me, so does that mean crossbows are done? And my response was, well, there's a few days left. And ironically, yesterday it got back on or Tuesday it got back on 3/14. So 2398, 5017, House Concurrent Resolution 5017, and I think this one is pretty important. We did help it get out of the Senate this year, but essentially it would allow a constitutional amendment, and it goes to the voters in November. If the voters amend the Constitution to allow the legislature to then set a differing rate for vessels, we could see a reduction in boat taxes for people, which I think our high level of taxation drives people to register their boats unlawfully in other areas, in other states. That is the follow-up from last year's House bills. This year's House bills, there was a Ducks Unlimited license plate. The bill has morphed into a multi-organization license plate bill. And the last I saw, it went to conference committee this morning. I don't know what happened out of this morning's conference committee. But those who would desire to have a Ducks Unlimited license plate and pay for that privilege would be able to do so at some point in the future. House Bill 2452 was actually a bill early on in the session, and it dealt with allowing governor's permits, and the department opposed the bill, and the proponent of the permits wanted to have these essentially almost the equivalent of our commission permits that they could just give to individuals rather than going through some sort of a process that nonprofits would draw for on a fair basis. The department opposed it because we thought it would lead to problems. Permits that have some sort of high value being just given to individuals. And so the bill had a hearing and got stuck in committee as a result of our opposition. House Bill 2491 was a bill that came as a result of our discussion at the last commission meeting regarding possession of firearms in archery season. The proponents then came back to me after we had this discussion at the commission meeting, and we came to a compromise about limiting it to just handguns. So essentially, the bill would allow individuals to possess handguns in a limited equipment season for self-protection. And it passed out of the House. I think it was my notes are too small, 113 to 8. And then it passed the Senate 40-0 unamended, so it's on its way to the governor for signature. 2709. In House Bill 2709, there are several proponents here in the room who helped with that bill and are continuing to help with the bill. Essentially, it was a result of people bringing forth concerns about law enforcement and restitution values, and there was an original bill, and the department opposed it, not because of the comment or the commentary about the bill, but because of the way it went about it, the procedural aspects of it. And so we helped craft a bill and a compromise that came out as a substitute. And essentially it requires restitution values for big game animals that violators would have to pay. And then there are some other changes in there. One of the changes would be to move from purple paint to a blaze orange as a method of marking your property, which has proved to be controversial with some landowners on the House floor. So they put a phase-in period in there. There were also some other amendments on the floor. There was a proposal first to allow the court to suspend somebody's privileges for a lifetime if they were an egregious enough violator. One legislator thought that went too far, and so there was an amendment to take that back to 20 years. And then there was an amendment that the department's going to have to oppose, essentially relating to allowing landowners to shoot from, or their employees, to shoot from roads at wildlife. And that came on the House floor. And so essentially the bill did pass Wednesday, I think, on House final action at 115 to 8, and which makes it a conferenceable bill. And why I bring that up is we've got to get a bill in conference. We're still, either our bills have flown through both houses unscathed, or they're stuck in one fashion or another. House Bill 2729 is a department bill, and it relates to motor vehicle permits for parks, and it would allow people when they register their vehicle to check a box, get their permit. It's another way to distribute permits. Essentially, it's a new way to distribute permits and be able to put those permits out in front of people and allow them to have, see it there instead of having to go somewhere to get it. And we think that that will increase participation in both the permitting system and opportunities in the parks. Other states have done this type of thing. Michigan, for example, estimated they needed about 16% of registered vehicles to break even, and ended up with 27%. So we think that if we could get 10% of the registered vehicles in our state, it would take some of those things that Robin talked about in relation to those highs and lows in participation based on blue-green algae. People would actually buy a permit instead of waiting to go to the park to buy a permit, and take out some of those highs and lows in our cash flow in the park system. That did pass out of the House, and it passed 84 to 39 and got referred to the Senate committee. The unfortunate thing about this bill, and in the process, the committee report was actually lost. And there's a thing called turnaround, and if you don't make it out of the House of Origin by turnaround, you have to have a blessed bill. It's a rule. It has to go through a certain process to remain alive. And so right before turnaround, the bill was passed out of committee. We were right on schedule. And then about a week later, we found the bill after the secretary called the speaker's office, and we were calling around to try to find it. So they blessed the bill. Instead of routing the bill back to House General Orders for it to be worked, they routed it back to committee, which set us back another week. So the bill did get out of the House late. Unfortunately, it didn't get to the Senate in time to get worked. There are still a couple days left next week, and there are some days left in the veto session. They're going to take about a 3-week break and then come back after Tuesday. Tuesday, they'll take a 3-week break and then come back again. Senate Bill, or House Bill 2735, and it deals with rail-banked rights-of-ways. Frank came to the hearing. There was a hearing on it. Essentially, it deals with taxation of rail-banked property that has been made into trails, and deals with a court case out of Marysville, I think. The bottom line is the bill did not go anywhere. It didn't get passed out of committee, but there was a hearing on it. And then there was a concurrent resolution 6015, which Robin pointed out, did commemorate the 75th anniversary of Fish and Wildlife Restoration Act. So with that, I will stand for any questions. It's a busy session, and things are still continuing to move, and maybe we can get some movement on our other stuff here in the next day or two.
Chris, would you explain to me what was added that landowners could shoot from roads, from vehicles?
It's difficult when you're on the House floor to hear what's going on the floor and hear the comments of the proponents of amendments. But the gist of what I heard was that there was concern that our department was out seizing vehicles from landowners who were shooting at deer from the road to try to protect their property, just shooting in the vicinity of deer. And then he also said something to the effect of, well, they'll just be seizing $150,000 tractors, which I find a little bit hilarious, but that's pretty much what I could catch. I think that provision is going to be impossible for our law enforcement officers to enforce. How do you know somebody shooting from the road is the employee of a landowner or tenant? And I think it also puts people at risk. So it's still a long ways. I mean, it seems like we're at the end of the session, but it's still a long ways to the end. And the bill has got to get into conference before it'll be tough to get the Senate to work it. They might have the days, but I think first we need to get a bill to conference. If we get a bill to conference, then the items that are in House Bill 2709 that we'd like to stay in, and that was what the bill was in, then we could get those into conference too, into that bill, because they have passed one House. And at this point, it's kind of strategic as to how we get that accomplished.
Chris, can you tell me where the crossbow is at? Is it in the legislature or done at the legislature?
No, it's still in play. So
do we do anything with it tonight then?
Well, it's proposed. The department's proposal is before you tonight.
It's a different proposal, though. I mean, the House and Senate both had one that comes through statute, and we have one of a reg tonight.
Right.
And probably what we do tonight will make the difference as to what happens with this other bill.
So if we take action tonight, most likely the legislature wouldn't do anything with it?
This is my assessment of how things build steam in the legislature. And so this is building steam, and it's come to a big head. I can't guarantee you that if you take action tonight that it would stop what's happening in the legislature, but it certainly takes the wind out of the sails of the proponents that the limited proposal before you tonight would I think, particularly in the Senate, I can guarantee, would entrench the Senate's position against crossbows.
So what is the proposal in the legislature right now?
Anybody could use a crossbow in a limited equipment season, such as archery.
Okay. So we're more restrictive then on our reg tonight than what they're looking at up there. Okay.
Yeah, there's is full inclusion for all seasons for everybody.
Okay.
Chris, do you feel that if we take action one way or another opposite of what the bill on the floor is, let's say we take an action different than what the bill is on the floor, that's going to make a difference on, and I know Randy probably just asked this question, but if we're contrary to what they're proposing, will that have an impact on what they're going to do with that bill?
Well,
because what's proposed to us, it appears like it's contrary to what.
Well, it's a limited proposal, but I think, when I was in discussions in the Senate and in committee in our opposition and our testimony, the most pointed questions were, you already have regulatory authority to do this, right? And I said, yes, we do. And that seemed to be the linchpin as to whether the Senate voted or not, or tabled the bill. And when I responded that we had regulatory authority, they basically tabled the bill. That's just what it boils down to. So I think that the proposal tonight is a limited approach, and I can't guarantee that the House isn't still going to figure out a way to get it so the Senate wants it or will take it, but I think it entrenches the position of the Senate. But I don't know that that's going to guarantee. I can almost guarantee you, though, that if something didn't pass, that there's going to be a real big push, a bigger push than I've seen so far.
Well, and Chris, you and your wife just had a new baby. Yeah, I know this floors you a little bit. I would suggest you teaching the art of jigsaw puzzles because you appear to be very good at it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make a comment. I went down and went over to that Senate committee hearing on the bill on the crossbows with Chris and Robin, and my perception afterwards is we'll see if we're going to do any regulation, but it's built enough steam in both sides. If we don't do something regulation-wise, my opinion is from those conversations, it will happen.
I tend to agree, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, that if we don't do something to liberalize crossbows, we'll probably have an even more liberalized crossbow usage bill put down our throats. I don't think we have any. I think we have to do something, and I think if we vote to restrict crossbows, we'll have them anyway, perhaps more liberally than what we're trying to propose.
Rather surprisingly, the issue's been followed by the Cap Journal even this year. Made the front page of the Cap Journal one Sunday, so usually our issues are not, and obviously the 65 proposal has made probably the front page of almost every newspaper in the state, so a couple of controversial issues in the legislature.
If we were to pass something tonight on our crossbow reg, how does that get communicated to the legislature?
Oh, I'll be there Monday morning, so it's the same. They'll be back Monday, and bills are still in play and they're still working along, and
just a regular process.
Just the regular process. Okay. So,
all right.
Does there seem to be more of a trend to pass more regulatory outdoors bills recently, or has this been something that's been going on for 100 years?
Well, deer has been the big one for the last 15 or 20 years. And prior to that, I think generally the legislature did the budget. It was my perception, did some regs, but nothing. And I don't know that it's just. I think it's a national trend, and I also think people understand or are more willing to email to their legislator if they don't get their way. Then we make a legislative mandate, and it's not just wildlife; it's everything. And Robin, by way of example, has the statute books from 1898 in his office, and they're about that thick. And then he's got the 1949 statutes, and they're about that thick. And I've got a whole shelf of statutes in my office from 2012. So the proliferation of statutes is not necessarily just related to wildlife, but you're seeing that across the board. But there is an increase probably in the last couple of years, particularly on Second Amendment issues, I think, probably related to wildlife, and that's on a national level.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Getting back to the trails bill, I find it kind of interesting that over the years, just about every year, almost every year, a bill is introduced by those folks who haven't caught the vision of what trails and will do for tourism, industrial development to the small communities along the trail. They propose a bill that will either slow down trail building or kill trail building. And in giving their testimony, their primary testimony is complaining that we're moving too slow on building trails. I find that interesting. And so I was glad you were there when they killed this one, and it'll come back again, but we'll kill it again. We do that.
Well, I'm sure the issue's not solved yet, and there continue to be conflicts between users. I am happy to say that the proponents of the bill actually recognized our department for the fine management that we have at Prairie Spirit.
Yeah. And one of the proponents of the bill, after taking up 90% of the committee's time, was asked very diplomatically to sit down and shut up. So he doesn't know how to testify, But it's always interesting,
Any other questions or questions from the public?
My name's Tim Don, just from El Dorado. I'm with the Quality Deer Management Association. When I was reading through the crossbow legislation that was in 314 yesterday, I was a little confused by the language. One, it says any person, which is what we're here talking about. Any person can use a crossbow for big game or turkey. One of the things that I've noticed in the next paragraph down, the paragraph B, is stated that the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks may limit the number of deer, antelope, elk, and wild turkey which may be taken pursuant to subsection A. Were they referring to subsection A as being the crossbow regulation?
Yes, and Tim, I'm going to point out Tim was a main proponent of House Bill 2709 and has been helping on that, and I appreciate that very much. The language in that bill is messed up, and I pointed that out to the committee. That's not, if that passes, I guarantee that's not going to be the language. Okay. It's going to be a different sort of version, something that our department's comfortable enforcing, but that's just there for the concept, essentially.
Because I was reading it as the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks still had authority to limit that. So,
They tried to modify a statute that probably should have just been stricken entirely and left. I don't think it's doing what the proponents are intending to do, and it's making a mess of our statutes. So
okay, and then House Bill 2709, which is the one we've been working on with the illegal hunting for big game animals. We already have a process through Wildlife and Parks for damage control for grazing purposes. What the representative, I believe his name was Seward from Pretty Prairie, had introduced into that bill. Do we have an opportunity to explain that to the folks up there that are voting, that there's already a process for that's not needed?
This is, and call me jaded for having done this for 13 years in the legislature. People don't really pay attention on the House floor, and you can pretty much almost say whatever you want to say and sway votes and basically, some of the people, Representative Larry Powell stood up and spoke against the provision. Representative Gary Hazlett spoke against the provision, against inserting that shoot from the road provision. And then on a voice vote, it was a yay, so they called for division, which is why we had a vote on it. And 77 people on the House floor voted for it. It's just difficult when things come on the floor. In a committee, you can sit down and talk, and you can talk to people afterwards. But when it's on the floor and people are in a hurry and they're not listening, and then they vote, that's how we end up with what we end up with.
Okay.
So,
I did receive an email last night from Representative Mast that Larry Powell had brought our bill, House Bill 2709, to see if it could be conferenced with Senate Bill 314. And the last message I had at there, she said she was seeing support for that. And I didn't know if you heard that had taken place or not, or what you knew about that part.
well, we've talked to Representative Powell. He's the chair of the committee. First, we have to get a bill in conference, and the most likely bill that we have right now is 314. If we can get 314 into conference, which means we need the House to pass it, then if we can get it to conference, then we can get 2709 and the provisions in there. And I don't see those being a problem on the Senate side. And then we'd have to, once we get it to conference, we can work with the conference committee members, and then it goes back to each house, and they have to vote on it again.
Right.
So that's the process, and I appreciate you contacting Peggy on that.
One more thing is, if these two bills are brought together, 314 and 2709 is in a part of 314, I basically need to know, this language is going to change throughout that process from what I understand, is we will, there's a possibility this paragraph might be taken out that from the hunting from the road. And then the other thing is with the crossbow issues on there, I need to know if I'm going to get support, if I'm going to gain support for 314 and 2709 being introduced into it, I need to know at some point when those changes are taking place or when that's happening.
Yeah.
Because I can't go out there to our members and our constituents that hey, go ahead and vote for this because we're going to allow landowners to shoot from the road. And so
understand
that's the issue we deal with, trying to get the word out to the public. So I just trying to make that clear that we're getting support for the right thing out there for wildlife and parks. So
appreciate that.
But just good communication.
As soon as we are finding out, those who follow our website and get our feed burner emails should know that they've been coming a lot more regularly this year because we have Mike Miller helping out on that and doing that. So I have to give him all the credit. And as soon as I know something, I'll let you know, of course.
Okay, I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back.
That's why.
That's the no cost solution. Because they turn to address the person in the right. That's whether we can violate provisions. Yeah, exactly. I'm the first guy to try exactly. Also, the city camera shot for you guys. That'd be great. Yeah. Let's see what it comes out to. When's our contract expire? And also, you still have the same issue. Yeah, that's the one thing.
Willing at that time.
Right here.
Okay, got it.
I'm excited. It's all right.
Can I have one?